with so Rokia, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. We're so glad you could join us for today's quarterly meeting for the Chicagoland Healthcare Workforce Collaborative. My name is Rokia Curvey-Johnson. I'm with the Rush System for Health. I serve as the Executive Director for the Rush Education and Career Hub and the Director for Community Health and Engagement. And I'm also one of the newest members of the CHWC Steering Committee. So to kick us off, before handing it over to Adrian, want to ground us in our purpose and just kind of frame while we're here. The mission of the Chicagoland Healthcare Workforce Collaborative unites employers and industry partners to support an inclusive healthcare workforce. We provide accessibility for unemployed and underemployed populations and develop innovative responses to the evolving needs of the healthcare industry. Our strategic priorities are around education and training, local and targeted hiring, and retention and career pathways. I think there's also the opportunity for innovation, and all of this means sharing across this group to make all of these priorities happen. Next slide. The history of CHWC began in 2016. It follows the sector partnership model and is led by an employer steering committee and supported by the many public partners and community-based organizations in the Chicagoland area. And so lots of folks who are around the table for us. Welcome to see many faces that I do know and organizations, but here is the list of our healthcare employers and strategic partners and funding partners. And I think with that, I am heading it over to Adrian.
Thanks, Rokia. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Adrian Esquivel. I'm the Deputy Director with the Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance. I've met many of you and just wanted to just thank you all for your time. And we've been a supporter of the collaborative since the beginning and look forward to continuing to support the employer-led solutions as the time continues to move on. So just briefly, you'll see in front of you is the agenda. I'm just going to introduce the new steering committee and then hand it over as we hear about the membership work. We're going to have a recap of the medical assistant pathways meeting. We're going to get a demo of careerpathways.net and Pathway Builder from Becca from the Funder Alliance. We're going to get a talent solutions finder demonstration from Origami Works. We're going to have an overview of the Cara Plus Inclusive Hiring Academy, and we'll have some time for announcements. So the new steering committee, thanks to those of you, so Angel, Ashley, Rokia, Susan, Mandy, and Clayton are now the steering committee. As many of you know, the collaborative has switched from 3 co-chair model to having a steering committee as well. So I just want to take a moment. I'm not sure if they're all on right now, but just to give a special thanks to Clayton, who was continuing on with the steering committee as well. But Betsy, Ray Hill, and Jason Swigner from UChicago Medicine and Sinai for the past several years have also been leading much of this work, and just wanted to publicly thank them for their time and their dedication to this work as well. Because as you all know, this is not always a primary job. This is something that is not taken for granted, the amount of work that goes into this work. So just on behalf of the Funder Alliance and others, just wanted to thank the new steering committee members and those who were the previous co-chairs. So with that, not sure I'm turning it over to, but maybe it's April.
Me.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Adrian. And yes, welcome to the new steering committee. I'm so grateful to all of you for your leadership, and I'm excited to continue to refine this collaborative over the course of the year. So I'm April Harrington. I'm the project manager of the Chicagoland Healthcare Workforce Collaborative. So first today, the steering committee and I would like to confirm our strategic partners in the collaborative and also expand our strategic membership to include some of the other training partners and community organizations that our hospitals are already working with, and that some of you here today represent. So the steering committee has decided that all organizations that support the healthcare workforce ecosystem and are committed to working with Chicago hospital systems to create a more inclusive workforce are eligible to become members. And then becoming members just means that you will receive invites to our quarterly meetings and our special events. You'll also be able to participate in appropriate action committees, and you'll be listed on our website. You'll also be able to submit content for our newsletters and for our quarterly meetings, although it will ultimately be up to the steering committee and myself to curate that information so that this does remain an employer-led table. So I'm going to drop in the chat just a very simple commitment form. It's a Google form for any and all of our strategic partners to sign up with. I'd like to get that done by early July so that we can update our website. And I'll also note that our steering committee is still discussing what it means to be an employer partner. And we're thinking about whether we will be inviting other types of employers like the FQHCs to the table. It's more of a when and not an if. But if you're an employer on this call, you don't have to do anything with this form. Don't worry, you're still a partner. But for our strategic partners, I appreciate it if you take a few minutes and fill that out. So moving on, I want to do a little recap of our recent medical assistant pathways industry convening that occurred on May 18th. And I'd like to thank our speakers again for participating. We heard from Chris Houston from Front Range Community Colleges in Colorado, from Christine Joga at Malcolm X, Monique Cannon from Northwestern, and Juan Jose Gonzalez from Ed Systems. It was a great conversation. And if you didn't tune in or you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to check it out. I'm going to drop that in the chat now. The recording, also pass it on. But I will go through some of the themes that came out of the event right now. So two salient themes that we heard in this event were first that medical assistants are highly trained and cover a wide range of skills and responsibilities, but they are often underpaid for the level of training and responsibility they take on. Second, we found that there are a wide variety of roles that MAs do move into when they're seeking higher positions, but that their credentials are not easily stackable, and that there are no clearly defined paths at this time. And some of the different next level occupations that came up in the convening include nursing, lab technician, clinical manager roles, physician's assistants, radiology tech, and patient navigator. Chris Houston presented an apprenticeship model that she runs in collaboration with the Northern Colorado Healthcare Partnership. It provides an earn while you learn model that can be completed in as little as 20 weeks. And they were able to trim down their 48 credit program to a 26 credit program in order to better align the time and cost spent in training with the demand for the job and the pay for the role. Chris also noted that the lack of career ladders for MAs is a problem. And she shared that Front Range Community College is trying to help MAs expand their scope of practice with additional certifications like EKG and phlebotomy. Then we heard from Christine Joga from Malcolm X, who described the more holistic approach that they've taken with their curriculum, which has a strong focus on soft skills, which employers have asked for, and a focus on cultural competency and bias. Christine also noted that some systems in Chicago have adopted a tiered system for their MAs so that there is an opportunity to move up within the medical assisting profession, in some cases becoming clinical managers, which is great to hear. Then we also heard from Juan Jose Gonzalez, who shared his work on college and career pathways and specifically bridges from secondary to post-secondary programs. And he shared that medical assisting is not one of the pathways that he advocates for at the high school level because it's not considered a living wage job and it doesn't easily stack into a living wage job. And he noted that while this opportunity might be more appropriate for other job seekers, Ed Systems feels that we should be putting high schoolers on a better career path trajectory. Finally, we heard from Monique Cannon, who leads Northwestern's clinical school in medical assisting. The program that they launched there a couple years ago only costs $1,000 for participants and lasts 10 months. Monique also told us about a medical assistant task force that Northwestern convened a few years ago when they saw a lot of turnover with MAs. They conducted some focus groups, and they heard two main pieces of feedback from their medical assistants. First, that they needed more pay, and second, that they wanted to feel more appreciated and important in their roles. And so Northwestern has made some changes to pay and to promotion opportunities, and bolstered their appreciation programs based on that feedback. And finally, at the close of the event, I asked each of the panelists what they thought needed to happen in order for us to meet our growing demand for medical assistants, while also providing quality jobs that have opportunities to advance. And the panelists all agreed that paying more would obviously help. And that goes hand in hand with recognizing or elevating the importance of MAs and recognizing that they're actually performing higher than entry-level tasks. And also Juan Jose suggested that we focus building apprenticeship programs for existing MAs to help them move into higher roles. So focusing on that bridge from entry level to middle skill. So again, I encourage you to view the event and share it with others. There are a lot more insights there that I didn't cover in this brief recap. But I also hope that we can use those insights to move forward on this issue today in relation to careerpathways.net, which we'll hear about in just a minute. But to give a little bit more context about why we're bringing in careerpathways.net today, I'll take another step back. So I'm not going to go into the entire history, but many of you may remember that CHWC conducted a visioning session with employer partners earlier this year. And then we had a follow-up conversation to refine the ideas that came out of that session. So we talked a lot about how difficult it is to upskill current employees and local residents who are seeking jobs, because there's a general lack of awareness around opportunities and the associated resources and trainings that are available out there. And there's a lack of awareness not only on the part of the employees or job seekers, but also on those of us who are in these workforce development roles and are trying to guide people through these pathways. So we talked about how it's really difficult to show an employee or a job seeker what their career ladder could look like, because these pathways aren't well mapped currently. And we decided it might be a good idea for CHWC to work on mapping these pathways. That's how we came up with this solution idea, and why I've brought in careerpathways.net today, because as you'll see, I think they provide a very interesting tool that could help ground our work in this pathway mapping and give us a space to do that. So without further ado, Becca, I will hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, April. Good morning, everybody. It's great to meet you. I'm seeing some familiar faces, some I haven't quite gotten to know yet. So I'm excited to get to know you and work together a little bit on this really exciting new tool. My name is Becca Senator. I am the Directory Administrator of Chicagoland Career Pathways, and I use pronouns they, them, and she, her. And I'm here with January Miller. January, I'm going to pass it off to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm January Miller. I'm founder of Embark, and I'm the product owner of Chicagoland Career Pathways, and I'm excited to be here this morning.
Awesome. So as we go through, we're going to blow through a lot of stuff really quickly. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go really in depth on some of the walkthroughs of the site that we'd like to. So as questions come up or things jump into your mind, feedback, concerns, feel free to drop them in the chat. January will be monitoring and answering. So we'll make sure that we can get to everything that we can on this call. And if anything comes up that you want to get into in more depth or talk about outside of this conversation, feel free to send either of us an email. Our emails are at the end of this presentation. We're always happy to talk more, set some time aside, jump on a call and discuss. So with that, Our agenda for this conversation is we're going to start with talking about what Career Pathways is. Then we'll talk a little bit about this tool that April was mentioning, the Pathway Builder. We'll do a quick walkthrough of the Pathway Builder, just a mock-up. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can collaborate, go through some kind of overarching questions that we're wondering about as we start to build in these health sciences pathways with your help. So Chicagoland Career Pathways is a free and open online directory of career training programs in Chicagoland. It's really an answer to information and access gaps, which is just people not knowing about these programs outside of bachelor's degree programs to get into really high growth, high opportunity careers like a medical assistant program. And the goal of the site is to provide both education about and access to these high quality options that can serve outside of, in addition to, or instead of bachelor's degree programs. And this site is accessible to both young adults and adult career seekers and career changers. You'll notice that some of the graphics are geared more towards young people, but anyone can use the site. All of the programs are required to be open to individuals who are at least 18 years of age. So they're all adult programs on some level, and ours is the only tool of its kind in our region. So we're seeing a lot more use. We'll talk a little bit about this on the next slide, but we're seeing a lot more use of the site for adult populations, thanks to a lot of really new emergent partnerships that we're seeing with the site, including the Office of the Mayor, World Business Chicago, City Colleges of Chicago. These are all really big spaces where we're connecting with these adult learner populations, in addition to Chicago Public Schools, which helps us continue to bring these secondary schools into the conversation and advise young people on what next steps could look like. So high schoolers who might say, I want to work as a nurse. How would I do that? What's my first step out of high school? That's kind of where we're making those connections. We also work really closely with Ed Systems Center. So Juan Jose, who you all worked with during the medical assistant conversation, we work really closely with them, and a lot of our collaboration is around this Pathway Builder tool. We also work with Chicago Jobs Council and a number of other organizations and institutions that help us really further kind of this mission of facilitating this education and access to these programs. We're growing every day. We have over 200 programs in our directory and over 120 providers in a myriad of different industries. And we're relatively young, only launched in January 2020, but since then we've served over 10,000 users, and we only expect that number to grow. So to get a quick introduction to the site, like I said, I wish we could do a full walkthrough, but for now, this will suffice. So we definitely encourage you to check out the site. It's careerpathways.net. So if you haven't been able to explore the tool yet, definitely encourage you to. This is our search page. This is where the heart and soul of the website is. This is the directory that we refer to. As you can see, there are a lot of different filters. Eligibility, affordability, and accessibility are big drop downs with a lot of other filtering criteria. So there's a lot of ways to search and kind of customize what you're looking for. We also have this great hot jobs feature. So this is an answer to a lot of users who are saying, there's a lot of great programs on this site, but I don't really know what jobs are thriving right now, especially during COVID. We were seeing a lot of day-to-day changes in what industries were flourishing, which ones were struggling. And so we produced this tool that lists all high demand, high opportunity, low barrier, well-paid positions in the Chicagoland region. And these are all occupations accessible through programs listed on the Career Pathway site. So as you can see, there's a number that are in healthcare. I think we have registered nurses there. We have nursing assistants, medical assistants. We have pharmacy technicians, dental hygienists. So we have, a bunch of titles on the site, but especially a good number of hot jobs on the site are health sciences positions. We also have this great resources page that helps our users connect to those resources that they might need to be able to say, yes, I feel comfortable and I feel confident entering into a career training program. It's difficult for our users to engage with these programs without having secure housing, for example, or childcare accessible to them. So this is another really popular part of the site. Some things that we're not walking through right now, but are important to mention. We also do a lot of virtual events. So we do some open houses, connecting our users to program providers. We connect, program providers to funders in our community. We like to connect some community-based organizations who offer these supportive services to our programs so that you can kind of build a relationship there and connect participants to community-based organizations that offer these supportive services. So we do a lot more than just what's on the site, and we would be happy to talk to you a little bit more about that at a later time as well. So with that, we're going to jump right into talking about the Pathway Builder. I know there's probably a lot more that we can dig into around the website, but for the sake of time, we're just going to go right to the tool. So this is a choose your own adventure style quiz that allows our users to explore possible career trajectories. So this is getting a little bit at what April was mentioning about trying to really map out these pathways and not only know, exactly what comes next or what could come next, but also allowing our users to really access that information, play around with it, get to know it, and understand what it might mean for them. So the goal is that this should be fun, interactive, and informative with plenty of quality information, not only about these programs, but also about jobs and how these different programs and credentials and job titles can connect to each other, stack on top of each other, and progress over time. So a few things that are important to know about this. One, it's designed with job seeker input. We're really big on, we only build things that our users ask for, and we only build it in the way that our users ask for it. As I mentioned before, this tool is in collaboration with Ed Systems and really grounded in their model programs of study and some emerging middle skills work from Ed Systems as well. Our also initial focus for this builder tool is going to be on the hot jobs. We want to start mapping those hot jobs first and then expand. Nearly all of these occupations are in either IT or health sciences, which is why we're here talking to you all. We've been working on the IT pathway, and we really want your input on the health sciences portion. And then finally, April covered a little bit of what these connections to the healthcare collaborative are. So I won't belabor that, but we're hoping that this is a really natural connection to the work that you've all been doing and the conversations that you've been having here. So a quick walkthrough of what this tool will look like. This is just a mock-up, but this is what it will look like on our site. So once you click start, you'll first select your field, in this case, health sciences and technology. From there, you'll go on to select a path. This is, selecting what general trajectory you're interested in. There's a quick description of what that path might look like, a median salary range for the positions on that pathway, and the future growth outlook for that pathway. In this case, our users selected nursing. So then they'll select their first step, their first program. We have a basic nursing assistant training program and a BNA fundamentals basic certificate at city colleges. For each of these programs, you'll see a quick description of what the program is, an estimated length, and an estimated cost, both in ranges based on what we have in our directory and potential job titles that might connect to this program or come after this program. You'll notice that they can also explore programs like this one that'll bring up our search page, but only show those programs relevant to this overarching program title. So for example, if they clicked on this orange button, it would take them to basic nursing assistant training programs in the directory. From there, you'll pick the job that comes after that. So you'll say, after I go through this BNA basic certificate, what job might I want to come after that? So you might go on and become a CNA. You might want to work as a personal care aide. There might be more than 2 titles. There might be 6 possible titles that come after a program, depending. For each of them, you'll see that there's a job description, entry, mid-level, and experienced wages. These are averages for Chicago, and predicted growth as well. And they can always click to learn more about this job at a partner organization's website. And that'll just kind of keep going. They'll build going between programs and jobs until either they hit the end of a program that we have mapped out, or they've selected a button that just says, I'd like to end my pathway here. This is as far as I want to go. And then they'll come to this review screen at the end that allows them to see their pathway built out and then see these pathway stats. This gives you an estimated time spent in career training programs, as well as an estimated cost of career training programs as a range, as well as a final wage range based on the last job title selected. Users can save their results as a PDF. They can forward them on to any guides that they work with, career advisors, mentors. They can save them for later and refer to them at a later time. So we're hoping that this is a really great tool for our users to play around with and figure out kind of what might come next, how to build towards the long-term success that they're looking for, especially in health sciences. So with that, let's talk a little bit about how we can collaborate on this tool. So we want to create an interactive pathway for medical assisting specifically. That's kind of our next step in health sciences. And we believe that this tool will serve our users best with your input. So I'm seeing some messages in the chat. I want to make sure, January, is there anything we want to talk about now before we start jumping into these collaboration points?
Just really quickly, there's a question about if it connects to the Road Trip Nation workforce portal. Can you jump over to the site and show really quickly how we do that?
Sure. So that's a really good question, and I'm glad. I don't know who brought that up, but that's a good point. So it's one of our many collaboration points working with Road Trip Nation. So you are getting a little bit of a walkthrough now anyway. So on our search page, once you check out one of the programs by clicking on their details, you'll notice that there are some programs, I believe this one has one. There are some programs where they have job titles associated with that program. There we go, yeah. And next to the job titles, this little orange star will link to Career One Stop, give a lot more detail about the description, skills, activities, abilities that are associated with that position. And this little green van, if you click on that, will bring you to a video from Road Trip Nation about that position. And these are all, we try to keep it to videos that are of individuals who did not obtain a bachelor's degree in their chosen field, just to be to connect to our users and answer some questions that they might have. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these videos, they're really great. Definitely encourage you to check out Road Trip Nation. But they are videos by people who are in particular occupations describing maybe a day in the life, how they got to that position, what their kind of career story is, just to give a little bit of a human face and narrative to some of these occupations and connect with users a little bit more. So that's a great question. We also link to them on our resources page as well, in I believe the career exploration section. Is there anything else we want to talk about here?
I just want to mention too, I know we want to get back to our questions here, but just mention really quickly that when we do professional development and we do workshops with young people, we have done so many with CPS specifically, and that site we always bring up in our workshops and sessions. So we're definitely amplifying the message of that site. So thank you for bringing that up, Rukia.
Absolutely. Great. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into some of these collaboration points. So our first question, and it seems like you all started to kind of discuss this a little bit during the medical assisting conversation, is we're just not sure what career steps might follow medical assisting. What does that pathway look like? As we're trying to map this out, we're having trouble kind of finding the natural next step, what the kind of natural sequence of positions might be. So our question is just what might come after, either programs or job titles. What kinds of certifications or credentials might be the natural next step for someone who's working as a medical assistant? And to answer this, you're welcome to drop something in the chat. You're welcome to unmute and shout out your answer. But this is kind of our primary question as we start to map out these pathways and figure out what this tool might look like for a medical assisting pathway. And I know we mentioned nursing, lab techs, physician's assistant, radiology technicians, a few others. I don't know if these are, I assume that these would be positions that you would need another credential for, go through another program for.
Becca, this is Mary Schmidt with Midwestern Career College, and I actually just had this discussion with Esperanza Healthcare last week, and there are a lot of different ways that medical assistants can continue their career. Certainly, they can get additional credentials within their field, EKG certifications, phlebotomy, et cetera. Many do go on to practice manager roles. Sometimes that requires additional business skills, and maybe some business courses or an associate degree in business might be helpful in that arena. Other times they do go on into the clinical arena, going into nursing or allied health positions such as sonography or MRI. So there are a number of different ways that they can go to, but that said, it is a viable career in and of itself. So depending on the organization that they're in, they may find that they can elevate very well within that organization if it has sufficient bandwidth.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that answer. That's really great to know. I know that as we started to think about it and go through this, we've noticed kind of something similar, that there's a lot of just kind of branching pathways and directions that a medical assistant can go. So I'm glad that you brought that up, as well as the point about medical assisting being a fine occupation in and of itself. Completely agree. Are kind of two criteria on which we tend to measure whether, how a job might look for a participant is we have kind of the one which is mobility and the other which is compensation. So if we see a job that's really high mobility into jobs that have high compensation, but a job that maybe is not so high on the compensation scale, that might be great for a participant. Something that is really low in mobility but really high in compensation, that might be a great job for participants. That might be what they want. And then the problem that we see sometimes is we see low mobility and low compensation. And I think in this situation, April mentioned that sometimes we tend to see medical assistants being a little bit undercompensated depending on what system they're working in, what area they're working in. And with that, we're kind of trying to ask the question of what is the mobility component like, and how easy is it for an individual to move through these systems? And it sounds like based on what you're saying, it seems like there are a lot of different directions. Do you feel that these are natural next steps? These are clear to individuals who are going through, who are in these roles, that these programs are accessible? And it seems like some of these managerial roles might not need programs. I guess what I'm asking is a little bit more about what moving through these roles might look like.
I think it's really dependent on the strength of the organization and how they support their employees. So if that support is strong, I know that there are a number of systems on the call today that have terrific employee retention strategies and career pathing, and work with high performers to identify roles that might be appropriate to them. Other organizations who perhaps have less vertical growth, for example, let's go back to the example of Esperanza Healthcare. They're a primary care provider. So there's, there's nursing, there's medical assisting, and there's physicians. So if you're a medical assistant, there may not be as many areas for you to go to. However, they do have a tiered structure within their medical assisting arena. So you can go, within levels there and become like a lead medical assistant and eventually even a clinic manager. So it really, I think, depends on that organization to kind of guide that individual. But I don't think it's as clear to people as it could be in terms of what their future pathways can be, because at our college, for example, we deal with a very non-traditional student. And very often they are a little bit older, have tried different routes before finding healthcare. And so, we at the college provide as much support as we possibly can as they're going through their education. But then, we hope that the employers continue that support and continue to guide that individual and develop them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. You're giving me great content here. I'm making lots of notes. So yeah, I think that's a really great point. The problem of, clarity and lack of knowledge and awareness. That's something that obviously the site was really built for and built around and built to answer. So I definitely appreciate that.
Becca, I wonder if I could hop in for just a second. Mary, that was it's a great point that many employers do have very strong employee retention strategies and pathway, their capacity to escort people along a pathway is strong. But I've also heard from employers that, they'd like some more help with that. And that's why I was bringing in this tool. So I'm curious to hear from some of the employer partners on the call. Do you feel like this tool can be helpful to help you, expose perhaps your non-clinical staff members to internal career pathways, to expose your medical assistants to career pathways once this is built out? or is there any feedback on how you see the benefit of this tool to your system?
It's a great question, April. I mean, yeah, that's really our primary concern, is that, you know, this is a useful tool for you. So the last thing that we want is to be having this conversation and talking through this with all of you and having you sit there and say, no one's going to use this. So that's really that's a great way for us to kind of to assess, is even if you want to drop a quick yes or no in the chat and just say, yes, this is helpful. No, this doesn't seem really helpful. That would be a great way for us to gauge as well. So feel free to unmute and give us more, but if the answer is just yes, this is helpful content, this is a helpful solution, that's also great.
I also know
Awesome.
there are a
Thank
lot
you.
of, there are several training providers on the call. Is this something that you think your students would find helpful?
This is Christine from Malcolm X. I think they would find it helpful. It would be interesting to see on a student perspective, organizations could add information about how they utilize their medical assistants, and each organization utilizes them differently, and what they offer at their different organizations. And so while they're entering medical assisting, that may engage them in where they want to start applying, or make them more work toward a certain organization because it aligns with what they see in their future.
I see. So specific information from employers about, you know, what it might look like to be a medical assistant at that particular institution.
What are the supports we have? What are the growth opportunities? And so that they can see what it looks like internally in the organizations. Because across Chicago, it is so different how each organization utilizes medical assistant, even within the network, even within the medical groups. So it could be useful to help the student choose, and then it gives them something to work toward.
Definitely, I hear that. And I for sure appreciate that. I think that's kind of where we're coming from on this conversation, is we've seen a lot of different pathways and a lot of different ways of that the medical assisting pathway can look, the medical assisting position itself can look, and trying to figure out how to square those together. That's a really good point. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing some points come up in the chat. Okay, it looks like January's got it. January, is there anything in there that you think we should address aloud?
Yeah, I think I appreciate the point from Rachel asking if there are any pathways for public health workers and community organizers, because apparently there are a lot of funds being allocated towards employing folks with deep community relationships. And, you know, I responded in the chat, but just so everybody can hear it out loud, and Becca, you can add to this if you like, but you know, this is our first attempt at making pathways. We're really trying to figure out how to build these out. So we started with some things that people know well, and it's been, even that has been kind of difficult to do, but we are definitely open to building any pathways that make sense, right? Because we're working with ed systems, we're working with all of these different people, but we're here to learn about those different pathways, understand them, so when we build them on the builder, it makes sense. We don't think that we'll be able to make obviously all the possible pathways, but the ones that are really floating to the top, that are strong opportunities, that are right now for people, we definitely want that information. So we would love it if you have information about that, to either, you know, talk about that now or follow up with us so that we can make sure that those are on the directory.
This is Rachel. Thank you so much for that explanation, January, and I'm happy to follow up. I think there's just some opportunities with regards to people that have been hired on as contact tracers, as well as an emerging group of vaccine ambassadors. While it's not a necessarily professionalized title, there are resources going towards that type of work, and Malcolm X actually has a training program right now for vaccine ambassadors from the community that is being co-supported by the city. And then the Partners in Health is an organization that is sort of building out a learning community for those participants, people that have completed that course, to engage and really strengthen their skills as facilitators, as community organizers with relational organizing, and thinking about public health opportunities or pathways to employment that are not necessarily clinical or disease specific. So I'd be happy to connect you offline to talk a little bit more about that.
That would be
Great.
great.
Thank you.
Community health workers, similarly have similar earnings to medical assistants, unfortunately. And there is a process underway at the state level where they're exploring creating some sort of certificate that would enable Medicaid organizations to reimburse for community health worker services. But the community health worker title is very broad, and community health workers are often considered within a medical context, but they also do work in non-medical, non-healthcare settings, which MCOs probably would not reimburse for. So there's a lot of work to do to sort of bridge that. But if you're advocating for medical assistance, there's definitely opportunity for community health workers too. I mean, it's the same type of level of job, but really you would be emphasizing on the pathway there. And if you think about some of the soft skills that are needed for these jobs, that's what really helps people excel, are some of the people focused skills. And I don't know also if you're also incorporating some IT tracks in health, but that's another hot field that has much more potential for earning from what I'm familiar with. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we would love to connect offline about all of this. Our biggest thing is making sure that our users have access to all the information that they might need to make an informed career choice, and make those decisions for themselves and make those evaluations. So, as much information as we could give our users in the most accessible way possible, that's what we want to do. So I appreciate that connection. Okay, so it seems like we only have about another minute. So I'm going to jump through, and there's a few other questions that I wanted to put on the table. April, it looks like you have something you might have wanted to add. Okay, cool. So I'm going to just jump through and show you kind of some other questions that are in our minds about this data, about this information, how we might get it, where we might get it from, as we start to build out the medical assistant pathway. So our next question would be, what barriers might individuals face in moving through this pathway? We started to get at that, how natural it is to actually move through these different steps, what these rungs of the ladder not only look like, but how you step up through them. What jobs or career goals do individuals working as medical assistants aspire to? Which is a slightly different question from the first one. Then the next career steps that might be the most obvious or natural for someone who's in this position might not be what they hope it is when they enter the position. So this is another question that we're having about, what are the values that individuals working as medical assistants have? What are their goals? What do they hope their trajectory looks like? Does it match up with what the trajectory actually is? And how can we maybe square those differences, offer enough information as they come into the medical assistant pathway so they have an understanding of what their long-term trajectories might look like? Or otherwise, how do we tweak what that trajectory looks like to more closely align with what individuals in these positions are hoping for? Big question. All of these are long-term questions, not things that we hope to answer in one conversation, so that's okay, but want to make sure they're on the table as well. And the last question is just, if any of these questions aren't answerable yet, if we don't have all the information, how do we work together to find these answers and help career seekers plan their futures? This is the question about bringing knowledge to the table, bringing that information to our users, as well as trying to figure out in what ways can we smooth out the transitions along this pathway, and what ways do we help our users move up that ladder, and how do we lower the barriers between different steps? So all of this is a lot. I'm sure we'll be having follow-up conversations. And if anything comes up that you all want to talk about in more depth, any connection points that you've noticed, feel free to reach out to us. I'll drop the link to this presentation in the chat as well. So you'll have our contact information, all these questions we've asked, the builder mock-up, our social media, all of that good stuff. So thank you for your time. I'm sorry we had to cut it short, but I'm sure, as I said, we'll follow up. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to April, and I'll drop the presentation link in the chat. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Becca and January. I really appreciate it. I actually just want, we can spend a couple more minutes. So I just want to open the floor to any sort of comments on this tool, on its usefulness to our hospital systems, on, I don't know, potentially another occupation that you think we should be looking at, any and all thoughts. I'm just going to leave some awkward silence until someone gives us one more insight.
April, can I just add something really quickly? This is January, and I just want to say that I just want to stress the point that this is definitely a work in progress. And the reason we're here is because we really want to use the minds at the table to help build this. And you're also talking to the people who are working most closely on the directory. So feedback that you give will be immediately used. So I just want to really encourage people, if this looks right, if it doesn't look right, you can help us build this by giving us your expertise.
Okay, we'll move on. But I look forward to picking this up with the steering committee and unpacking how CHWC can continue to work with careerpathways.net in our ideas around career pathway mapping. So thank you again, Becca and January. Now we're going to turn to what is the employer-facing sort of companion website and tool, which is the Talent Solutions Connector. I'm going to pass it off to Tammy Hilberry and Danny Petrie to give us a demo on that.
Thanks so much, April. I'll start. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I don't know if you need to make me a co-host.
I think I have, so let me know if you can't.
All right. How are we doing? Can we see?
We can see your screen, yes.
Fantastic. All right, well, thanks again for having Origami Works Foundation, and we're here to share another tool, a directory. As April noted, this one is the kind of employer-facing, an employer-facing version. And if you find that there are some things in common between the tool you just saw and this tool, that's really not a coincidence, because my organization, Origami Works Foundation, helped launch Talent Solutions careerpathways.net a few years ago, and then this tool is kind of building on that initial work. So that was before we turned it over to Chicago Workforce Funder Alliance in January, and Becca, who've just done a fantastic job of getting it to a whole new level of effectiveness and usability. So we're so excited about that. And now this is a new tool for your community. So Talent Solution Connector is an online directory of resources that are either free or subsidized to help companies and other employers with a whole array of talent-related issues, hiring, retaining, training employees, and also networking with one another to solve problems. So in going over this, I'm going to focus on a few areas. First, I'm going to give you some context where this tool came from, talk about our major goals for it. We'll talk about our process for developing the tool. Then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Tammy Hilberry, to demonstrate the tool briefly, and then we'll have some time for feedback and questions. We're going to go pretty quickly because you'll be able to explore this tool on your own. We will provide a link in the chat and also by following up. So let's start with some context. Talent Solution Connector is one of the first projects to come from a new initiative called NEWS, which is the Network of Employer-Led Workforce Solutions. And I know you guys know about this because you're a member of this group. So this is one of the first tools to emerge from NEWS. As you know, NEWS came about from conversations among Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance and the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development about all the amazing work that was coming out of sector partnerships and employer tables such as yours And some of those collaborators are referenced on this slide. News is a collaboration among all these employer tables with two main goals. Again, I know I'm telling you things you know, but just to set the context, News is seeking to lift up all the good work that's already being done within these tables and sector partnerships. And we're looking to be a hub for communication and resource sharing. These groups of employers, whether you're healthcare or manufacturing or early childhood education and other areas, actually experience a lot of the same problems. So sharing of solutions and resources helps to eliminate barriers so that all sector partnerships in the Chicago region can hit their goals. So again, one of the first tools or resources coming out of the News Initiative is this Talent Solutions Connector. So let's talk about it specifically. Here are a few main goals of Talent Solutions Connector. First of all, we want the tool to be for employers and by employers. The resources and materials in the website need to be useful to employers such as yourselves and communicated from an employer's perspective. We also wanted to make sure employers are involved at all phases from early development through the continuing maintenance of the directory. Just like Becca was talking about for careerpathways.net, looking to involve stakeholders all the time, we share that philosophy. Another goal is we want to increase awareness of subsidized talent services. There are a lot of really good services out there from nonprofit organizations, from government, from community colleges, and other funding sources. A lot of the problems that companies might think are just part of doing business might be improved by a service that these organizations provide. And we're looking to raise awareness throughout the Chicago area. And finally, we wanted to create a hub to allow for the natural sharing of resources that's already happening within the employer tables and sector partnerships. We want that sharing to be amplified and to be easier, because sometimes an employer might be working with a provider to tap new sources of talent or do train to hire programs or a retention program. They might be having a great experience, but if you as an employer don't know to even ask about it, it can be really hard to be lucky enough to land on the best service or solution for you. So our goal is to have one place where trusted services can be found and explored more easily by employers like yourself. So let's talk about our process just a little bit. First of all, employers were involved in this process from the beginning. We had a group of engaged employers who met every other week to provide constant feedback to the developing website. Our team from Origami Works Foundation worked really hard along with Chicagoland Workforce Funder Alliance and the Bureau to develop an amazing initial database, but then each iteration would be shown to these employers to make sure it was providing the services they needed and was also being communicated in a way that they would understand. So as of April 1, we launched a beta site, which is what you're going to be seeing today. It is absolutely not a final version, which is why we're here, because we would like to hear from you and others like you about how to make this a useful tool. So we're looking for feedback both during the meeting and after the meeting to help us make this better. Both the structure of the actual website and then the data included in it, the providers and services that are actually accessible from the site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy Hilberry to demonstrate how the site works. So I'm going to stop my share.
Thank you, Danny. All right, so as Danny mentioned, we are in beta mode. So I shared a link to the site. It's live. You're welcome to go play around while I'm showing you around, because just like Becca, I'm going to be doing a very abbreviated version of walking through this and hope that you will take some time afterwards or during the presentation to play around with it and ask questions. So as you come to the site, you will get this pop-up that it's a beta version. And first, I just want to walk you through the home screen a little bit. Right here, we've got this search bar, which I think is going to be, probably everyone's go-to. But we've also got some buttons down here where you can click different kinds, different categories of solutions that you're looking for. Good old mission statement. And down at the bottom, we will always have some featured programs that will be shifted out every week, just to, raise awareness of some of these programs. All of the site is to help connect with resources, but also to educate. So we make sure that we front and center educational things like what are workforce services, where you can learn about the different things that are available, as well as connecting then to services that are listed in our directory. So like you'll see here in recruiting and hiring, we have some different types of services and then a featured service that fits into that category. So I'm going to go back to the homepage here and we're going to do a search. We're going to say that I'm an employer and I'm looking to do some hiring. So I might type in, I'm looking for assistance with hiring. And as our results populate over here, you see we've got 16 services that mention hiring or about hiring. And they're listed briefly over here, and then I can click on them for further details. And that takes us to a service detail page that's got a description and some information about areas served. As we mentioned, this is a beta version. We're still working on getting some of these data points filled in. And we're working with providers directly to fill in their information, just so that we make sure that it's as up to date as possible, as well as helping them to work on making descriptions that are employer facing, so that they are describing their services in a way that speaks to an employer, so that the employer can understand why this service is useful to them. So going back, I just wanted to highlight over here, we've also got some filters that can be applied. For example, if you know exactly what kind of service type you're looking for, you might click on one of these. And then we've also got another feature down here about prioritized populations. Sometimes employers are looking to meet certain goals with hiring, and we have a long list of prioritized populations that they can choose from to take them to services that are really focused on different prioritized populations. And then lastly, just really quickly, I want to take you over to our fancy sample entry. Oh, maybe not. No, I guess not. Oh, it's because I still have apprenticeship up. Our sample job thing is not an apprenticeship. See, it works really well. All right, so this is our sample job placement service that we've got in here to play around with and show you some things. And we just launched, we're really excited, in the spirit of for employers by employers. Down here, we've got our endorsements section. So this is going to be a place where employers who have used services can leave feedback. They can, you can see over here, we've got some, highlighted things that they did really well, as well as over here, we've got some written testimonials. So the way this works is that an employer would come over here if they want to endorse the service. They click this button and this pops up. They'll include their organization and email. The email is not included, it's not shown publicly. It's for us to verify. All endorsements go through the admin side first, just so that we can make sure that they're accurate and not spam before they go live. And as you can see, these are some of the qualities that you can choose as many or as few as you want. And these are specified to the type of service. For example, if we were to go over to a training, there would be some options in here that would say things like, excellent delivery of course materials, or, great facilitators, things like that. And then if they choose to leave a written public testimonial, this is where they would put all the glowing praise for the services, as well as approximate dates of engagement. And then there's also a section for private feedback. So if there's something that they wanted to let the service provider know about, but don't want to make it public for whatever reason, they can put that here and it goes into an email. So that is a very, very brief overview of the Talent Solutions Connector tool. And now I would like to open it up if anyone has any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing because I'm hoping that you're on your own browser, digging around in there and looking for things. Oh, January says she likes the endorsement section. Thank you, January. I do too. That's been really fun putting together. And we've gotten some really good feedback. We just did a provider event last week where we introduced it to some of our providers that are in the directory, and we're working with them to start to reach out to employers that they've worked with successfully to try to get them to come and leave some endorsements.
So I'll just speak up while we're waiting for some questions to come in, if there are any. Just I hope that it's clear kind of the difference between these two tools. If anybody has any questions about that, feel free to ask. But obviously, careerpathways.net faces youth and their guides, whereas our tool is employer facing. So it's meant to be used directly by talent and HR departments of employers, such as you guys.
I'm curious to know if any of the employers on the call want to speak up as to whether this looks like a useful tool to them. It certainly is in line with our goals at CHWC to create a more inclusive workforce with our local and targeted hiring, partnerships with career and training partners. Does this feel like it's filling a need, or are there other needs that you feel like this tool might not be getting at that you are experiencing?
Great question, April. Thank you.
I can chime in, and even though I'll actually be speaking shortly from a different capacity, I actually used to work for a chamber of commerce, so I got to interface with a lot of different employers, and from all of the feedback I received from employers that were hungry to engage with new types of talent, for them, one of the biggest challenges was there's so many organizations out there. Where do I start? So a tool like this for me is brilliant. It's been serving a need that I've been hearing about for a long time.
That's so great to hear, Liana. Thank you. We had the same impression that there was until this tool existed, there was no one place that you could find a collection of these types of services and compare them that was focused for employers. So that was our goal. I'm glad to hear you think it might meet a need. Matt or Adrian, I don't know if you guys want to add anything that hasn't come up yet before we turn it back over.
Hi, everyone. I've just been listening. I'll add one thing. I mean, I think when I think about the origin of this tool, I think back to previous experiences that this group has had, like, when we did a convening with the CHWC, we brought together the medical assistant training programs and talked to them about the needs of the employers at the time, what the training programs were doing, how the connections were working, how they weren't working. Well, that's information that we captured for that one event, all the contact information for those medical assistant training programs. And then as a collaborative, we had that information going forward, and any new employer to the collaborative or as staff changed, we could then share that list if we wanted to, like, okay, here are all the training programs if you're just looking for the training programs, and we've talked to them. So in some ways, this is building on that same idea that happens sort of organically with these employer tables, and this just creates a place where we can do that more efficiently and more sort of permanently or sustainably over time. So it's not on some Google sheet somewhere. We have a place we can capture all the information.
Lastly, I would add that I could see a need. I'm thinking particularly, it's funny in light of Rachel's point around community health workers. And for us right now, we do have quite a few grants that some are short term, and they're not really, it might be 5 months, 6 months, and it's hard for us as an organization to want to bring on someone for such a short period of time. But there may be multiple grants, right, that come along. But in the meantime, it's like, we'd rather be able to go to an agency or get something figured out where it's like, yes, we can hire some folks for a 6-month period, a community health worker for a 6-month period, and then, provided other grants get added on, we can do more, but not necessarily want to do the like full out hiring. And there may be some, and there may be surges, and that's something we're thinking about in particular with, any kind of, God willing, we don't go back to the phases that we were with COVID, but just the fact that we may have these surges and need to kind of staff up really quickly for a short period of time, this could be very, very helpful for us.
Well, that's given rise to 2 ideas. Thank you so much, because I hear you kind of that maybe it would be helpful to be able to zero in on kind of temporary hires, which I think we could do. And then I'm also wondering whether at some iteration of this tool, the availability of grants and other funds to help hire people might be something we could integrate. All right, we can add that to the IDEO generator and consider it for future versions. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy and Danny, for presenting this tool. I will keep CHWC informed, especially when it is actually launched, and feel free to send me anything for the newsletters. And with that, I'd like to introduce one of the talent solutions that is listed on the connector, which is Cara Plus's inclusive hiring services with Liana Braun. Liana, I think you have permission to share your screen, so jump in anytime.
Fantastic. And thank you, April. Thank you to the collaborative. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Liana Braun. I am the Director of Expansion Strategy at Cara Plus, which is the national expansion arm of Cara. And so for those of you that don't know Cara, we are a workforce development organization based in Chicago. We've worked with individuals experiencing different barriers to employment. We've helped them move into 12,000 jobs with a 70% same firm 1-year retention rate, which is 20 points higher than the national average. And to share a quick snapshot around our participant population, about 1/3 of them have not attained their high school diploma. Little less than half have in some way bumped up against the criminal justice system, and 90% come from communities of color. Another really important stakeholder for Cara is our employer partners. We also work with 70+ employers and are very fortunate to actually have many members of this collaborative involved among those partners. And actually, what I'll be talking about this morning is how we've bottled up this 30 years of experience connecting 10,000+ job seekers with over 1,000 employers over a history to engage employers in a new way, and specifically around how to activate more inclusive employment practices. And when we think about inclusive employment, we think about it building upon some of your existing DEI efforts, where we're specifically honing in on how you might hire and cultivate talent from communities that have been historically sidelined. And so the point I want to make here that's especially relevant is it's the how. I want to draw a circle around the how, because again, Cara has been doing this work for some time, making those one-to-one placements between talent from the community with employer partners that value that talent. But now we're lifting up to look at our learnings over that time to start thinking about those practices that can expand this impact across many more organizations. And for us, part of this process has been identifying 5 key levers around inclusive employment. So those levers for us look like sourcing, so beginning to have conversations around how employers are currently attracting and bringing in these new talent pools. Hiring, So are those candidates able to successfully navigate the application process so that they can eventually contribute their talent and be added to these organizations? We also care deeply around job quality and support. So directly how employers are improving retention. Again, looking at how they're not only creating good jobs, but offering those supportive environments that allow employees to be successful. And then finally, advancement. So for many of our participants, they share with us, it's not just the conditions of having a good job, but also looking towards the future of being able to grow their own talents and their contributions within organizations. And the last point is actually one that we're especially curious about. And we believe that when you have spaces like this, where you have employers that are willing to share how they're advancing inclusive employment, it actually has an impact on the broader ecosystem. So that's why we care about employers being able to share with the broader community some of the things that they're doing. And one thing I'll call out here is that this very conversation that has happened within the collaborative today touches on many of these points in the inclusive employment roadmap. So it's really exciting to see the ways in which you're already engaging here. So again, I want to take a little bit more time to go deeper on the how. Again, recognizing that Cara has been doing this work for a long time, and we're shifting to now take our learnings to help employers to think about those inclusive employment practices. So I'll speak about one strategy which focuses on creating cohort-based communities where we share some of our best practices, some of our tangible, actionable strategies around inclusive employment, and also create that peer learning community. Another strategy we'll be deploying is around high impact pilots with select partners that are ready to go deeper, recognizing that it's not just highlighting those practice changes, but thinking about how you can start to test and implement them in a realistic way in your organization. And then finally, thinking about how we can shift the narrative more broadly. So more employers can understand the value of overlooked talent pools and also appreciate how many of the barriers to employment are a little bit tricky or more slippery in that some of them are very explicit and things that we all know about, but there's also many implicit barriers that oftentimes we're just not aware that we're creating. So we'll start with the first strategy, which is around activating inclusion through this cohort model. So we have had at this point 12 unique employers go through our cohort programs, and we have one so far that is focused on sourcing and hiring, which are our first two levers of inclusive employment. We talk about things like reducing barriers for candidates, being able to just attract a more diverse talent pool by thinking about the ways you're engaging these different populations, and also thinking about how bias can enter into some of these processes. We've also recently launched our Retention and Advancement Institute, again, looking at what happens later on in the talent life cycle, once employees show up, once they're there in the door, and especially thinking about how for some employers, this might be the first time that they are tapping into these new talent pools. And so there might be new or different challenges they're encountering in terms of creating that supportive environment. So we talk about things like onboarding, making sure you have this culture of belonging, especially when you think about integrating new populations. We also look at the important relationship between frontline employees and their managers, as well as growing these broader pathways for advancement. So we'll take a moment to actually call out the experience of one of the employers that went through the Institute, and call out that actually several members of the collaborative have had the experience and the opportunity to engage with us in this way. So I'll share just one of their journeys to give you a little bit more color around what this experience actually looks like. So starting with one hospital's journey, they began by setting their intention for the cohort. They decided they wanted to attract a diversified population and establish relationships with community organizations to create new pipelines, which in the future now we'll know to engage with the Talent Solutions Connector as a really easy tool for them to get started with that. They also wanted to change their approach for recruitment and thinking about moving beyond just filling a position with a body, right? That's often how, when you're doing these large scale hiring, sometimes you can get into that framework. So we worked with them to think about those implicit and explicit job requirements and other barriers that were preventing candidates from moving through their application cycle. We also gave them direct and actionable feedback on one of their job descriptions. It was around a patient care sitter position that they were trying to hire for. We then helped them to reflect on their application process, and we actually had a panel of our participants share their experience of going through the application and hiring process to lift up what were some of the challenges they had encountered, as well as some of the things that they had seen employers do incredibly well. And then, as I shared before, we do spend time thinking about implicit bias in the hiring process as an important part of the journey. And then we closed out in this experience, again, thinking about next steps and how you can implement some of these practices. So we had this peer solution salon where they had the chance to share a challenge and get feedback from others in the group. And so this particular hospital system, they talked about hiring more diverse candidates, not only in the entry-level positions, but mid-level and management positions, and thinking through some of the roadblocks they were experiencing in terms of getting buy-in from the system. And you'll see on the right, part of the last part of this process was stating intentional commitments for their next steps. The next strategy I'll take a couple of moments to share in terms of what we're doing in inclusive employment and how this is different from what we've done historically at Cara, is working with employers to accelerate adoption, knowing that real and significant change can be tricky and it involves a lot of different stakeholders and buy-in across the organization. So with these pilots that we'll be launching, we'll be identifying the particular challenge the employer wants to go deeper on, whether it's attracting overlooked talent, hiring talent, or even retaining employees, thinking about what are some of those practices that they can test in their organization, and then think about scaling. And one other thing I'll share here is that you might ask yourself, why Cara? Why could an organization that's historically done direct service, how could they be positioned to even inform or implement practice change? And I'll share actually just a couple of examples of around how Cara has been doing this over our history, where we have been strategic partners with employers, helping to think through and solve for some of those challenges around either hiring from our participant pool or helping to retain them. So a few examples of how we've already been working with health systems around their practice changes are thinking about opportunities for community hiring. So we've worked with several that in particular are adopting these hyper-local strategies. So we deployed a hiring event that in one case we were able to get 24 qualified candidates and 18 from their target HEAL zip codes, which I know many people in this group are involved in HEAL, so that is a relevant metric for them. We also had an employee-informed scheduling as another practice where an employer came to us and said, hey, we need to get to a goal of 24/7 surgical supply coverage for their level 1 trauma center that they were launching. And not only did we help them achieve that by coming up with a scheduling that would meet that business need, but we also allowed the employees to share what scheduling practices would best meet their individual needs. And then a couple of final things I'll share is we've also spent a lot of time just being very intentional about the job requirements that are actually needed for employees to be successful in their roles, whether it's looking at educational requirements, background checks, even updating drug testing requirements in an intentional way. So that's been an important part of our work, as well as just giving feedback on the application experience. And this works because not only are we hearing the perspective of individual employers, but we're hearing from our participants about what's working and what's not. And we also have this advantage of having a bird's eye view of working with so many employers and saying, hey, we saw employer A test out this practice and it worked. They're hiring or they're retaining they're more employees and they're meeting their goals, in a way to give an opportunity for others to follow that same path. And then the last way I'll touch on is recognizing that shifting the narrative, having these important conversations is an important part of this process. One way we've done this is by sharing a documentary called The Road Up that features the stories of 4 Cara participants. And so we've had these screenings at some large national companies as a way to begin the conversation and help inspire action around inclusive employment. There's nothing more I would love than to start thinking about how we can all build a more inclusive economy together. If you are interested in learning more, we'll be having an inclusive hiring webinar later next month, but I would be happy to answer any questions either after the session, or if you have any, you can put them in the chat. If we do have time, I'm happy to address any, but I just thank you for the opportunity to share with you and be part of this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Liana. I know that there are several employer partners today who will be watching this later. And I'll be bringing this to the steering committee. Nothing would excite me more than to have some of our hospital systems want to join the academy or create a healthcare specific cohort. So I'd love to continue that conversation. I know that we're getting close to time, so I'm dropping just a very brief poll in the chat, and that does have some questions around your interest in Cara Plus and their services. So if everyone could just take a moment to fill that out before they leave today, that would be really helpful. And then I also want to just open up the floor right now for announcements from anyone. And I'm also going to put my email in the chat. If you have announcements that you would like to get in front of the entire collaborative, I will be sending out a newsletter with this recording and the slides either later this week or very early next week. So also feel free to send those directly to me. So if anyone has a question for Liana or a community announcement, go ahead and jump right in before we close today.
April, can I just say hello?
Yes.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. I'm Tamara Frolickstein-Appel. I work at an organization called Upwardly Global. We help skilled immigrants and refugees get professional jobs in the US. And I am a job coach in Chicago and also the leader of the national healthcare team. And I'm just so glad to be here. I certainly hope that we will become a strategic partner, but we've been thinking, we work with nurses and doctors and pharmacists from all over the world and thinking about helping them to enter the Chicago healthcare community. I would love to talk to any of you individually. We have some support to grow our networks in Chicago, which is why I've been able to do some outreach and connect, and just really excited to be part of these conversations. I'm gonna pop our website and my email in the chat if anyone wants to connect, and hopefully I will continue to see you in these meetings. I know we had a little blurb in a recent newsletter, and we're just excited about all this fabulous work and connecting with both employers and community groups to support immigrants and refugees.
Thank you, Tamar. Does anyone else want to share anything?
Maybe I'll just share an invitation, because I know I shared an opportunity for employers to connect with us, but Tamar and others that are in peer organizations, something we're also very interested in is connecting with peers to support one another in this work. So I know there's representatives from a lot of different organizations. So if you would like to connect and just figure out a way to partner, always open to that as well.
I'll chime in and say same goes for us at the Talent Solutions Connector.
Wonderful. I don't mean to call you out, but Nicole, do you have a brief update for us on the youth ambassadors?
So the content has been done, and we are currently kind of working to put it into more of like a toolkit format, which will be a facilitator's guide and a PowerPoint presentation. So it will be geared towards instructors. So instructors can take that and then use it within their internship program. So we're going to try to pilot it this summer. We are piloting it this summer with existing internship programs at a number of hospitals and kind of see where it goes from there. It looks really good. I don't want to show it to you yet because we're still kind of finalizing it, but maybe during the next meeting, I can kind of give you a quick, snapshot of what it looked like and kind of some of the feedback that we're receiving. But we've kind of done some soft piloting a little bit with some school year programs and had some really good conversations. And yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That's great to hear. Congrats. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all. Well, thank you so much for joining this morning. I appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules and this busy summer. Our next meeting will be in September. I want to say the 15th. It's a Tuesday. I'm going to make sure to send out a calendar invite because I think that that's easier for people to get it on their calendar. So I'll do that. A newsletter will be out soon with this recording. Please feel free to email me with any sort of feedback, anything that you'd like to be in the newsletters, anything that you'd like to cover in our next quarterly meeting or outside of the quarterly meeting. I want to hear it all. So thank you again. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.